Listen, good morning, everybody. My name is Declan Curran, normally from Brussels, but I'm coming at you today from sunny Valencia in Spain. Delighted to be joining this meeting today and really want to say how grateful I am to our speakers for making themselves available, because I think what's hugely important in this webinar and the other webinars that we have developed is really promoting discussion and dialogue and the exchange of views. And of course, we do this within a period of very important policy making. And of course, I know online today we have speakers from indeed, many parts of the globe, and they're very, very welcome. So to them, I just want to apologize in advance for the sort of Eurocentric perspective we are taking, but I suppose that's just a logical in one sense, but really the issues being discussed here today are absolutely global, if anything. And I think what's highlighted the importance of skills, upskilling, reskilling is the massive importance of evolving human capital development, the appropriate skills to address future challenges. And of course, I won't deal with the future challenges here because we're very, very familiar with them. We would not have been as familiar with the global context prior to COVID-19. But what that has done is really put into sharp relief, one, the global nature of pandemics and the need for preparedness in future, and that's again, if anything, that's global. But of course, that preparedness relies enormously on the right people with the right skill set, and I think that's what we'll look at today. And also, I mentioned the policy context. I think this is worth bearing in mind. So again, sorry for the European flavor, but it is one context. And before I talk about the European context, just want to highlight the importance of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And while well established, I think now they are really becoming mature in the sense that they are much more recognized in terms of how to respond to global challenges. And of course, when the SDGs were established, pandemics were not first and foremost, but certainly they are now. So I think that global context is hugely important. And you will see, talking about Europe, that in future programming, and again, without going into all the details, but you will know that we're working towards the launch of programs like Horizon Europe and the NDC program and the various other recovery mechanisms, from about now to January 1, those formal programs starting then. And of course, there are recovery support mechanisms underway as we speak. And they, are putting a very, very sharp focus again on individuals and the importance of sustaining economic capacity, although that is an enormous challenge. But it comes down to making sure, in part, that people are available with the appropriate skills. So we're looking forward to hearing a lot about that today. So I think without much further ado, I'd like first to introduce Ian Jones, CEO at Innopharma Ireland, and he will address the skills contribution to economic recovery and industry development. Ian, the Zoom is yours.
Thanks, Declan. Okay, I'm going to share a few slides, guys. Hopefully this magic will work, and we'll go full screen. Okay, very good. Thanks, Declan. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ian Jones. I'm president of Innopharma. Thank you to all the speakers for participating, and thank you for all the participants for getting involved this morning. I guess there's three things I'm going to talk about this morning. One, I'm going to give an overview of Innopharma, what we do, small bit on that. Then I'm going to talk about industry and the skills landscape right now, where it is in Europe and globally. It's at a really interesting, exciting time in terms of industrial revolution, but it also a critical time in terms of how can we maintain our competitiveness from a European perspective, but also globally and European, how can we achieve our green or sustainability goals. Also in a post-COVID world, what does industry? What does making stuff mean now, and how will it look in the future? So I'm going to talk a little bit about all that, and then finally put forward some potential mechanisms on how we could address those skills challenges at a broad pan-European level, but also I'm very interested in a South African context as well, and we have looked at that. In terms of pharma, we are an education institute. We're also a research institute. On the education side, we partner with industry, with government, with local academic institutions to develop tailor-made programs that help people through skills either move in to the high-tech manufacturing sectors of biopharma, medtech, food tech, ICT, or to progress their career in those sectors. And I guess what we're about is helping them get jobs or helping to progress and secure their job within those industries. I guess we have a unique way, or we feel we have a unique way that we've developed over the last 11 years in developing those programs and that upskilling approach. And we've been pushing an upskilling agenda within Europe and the solution that it can bring for the last 5-6 years now, I think, because we are passionate about upskilling and reskilling, and we see the need for it, and we see it even greater now. And hence the purpose of this webinar series is really to shine a light on that and to put forward some proposals, not just to talk about a problem, but to talk about how we can potentially solve it. Very quickly, on our research division, we develop sensors and Industry 4.0 platforms so that we can get machines talking and get the data from those machines and help control those processes that those machines might be working on. We work with all of the 10 biopharma, we work with medtech and food tech and ICT as well. And we've managed multiple, 8 or 9 European large projects at this stage around the research space. In terms of Europe and where is it going, the industry strategy document towards 2030 that was published back in March is really, really good, really well written. And it talks about Europe having always been the home of industry. And I guess that's right, because if you look at the first industrial revolution with steam or the second one with electricity, they were both rooted in Europe. Same for the third one, post-World War II. It originated here, but I think the benefits of the third industrial revolution with the internet has probably been more a global phenomenon rather than a European-led one. If be it the Facebooks, the Twitters, whoever else that are now benefiting, it's beyond Europe in terms of leadership. And the risk is, from a fourth industrial revolution perspective, which I know Rainer will talk a little bit about as well, the concern is, will we lose even more competitiveness? Will that disruption, the greater disruption that brings, will Europe lose out? Or to convert it the other way, how can we benefit, and how can other geographies around the world benefit from that industrial revolution? Not only to look at competitiveness and how we can make products, but also to achieve our green goals, our green agenda, and to be more resilient post-COVID, because I think it's reasonable to say there will be something else in the future that will disrupt our economies and how we engage. So how can we be more resilient the next time? I think what's great to say is that policy in Europe has really followed and really been quite active in a good way over the last 2 years, 3 years around industry, industrial competitiveness, environment, green economy, and also advanced manufacturing, but covering them all, skills. And there's finally a great acknowledgement that skills is the pathway to not only competitiveness, but to social cohesion and to citizen happiness. And that's key. That's key. And I guess if we're deciding where to invest in skills and what skills to invest in, we're putting forward the argument that Industry 4.0 type skills around data, understanding data, are a safe bet to current employability and to future prospects for employability, as well as having an impact on all of those key European strategic goals around competitiveness, green agenda, and a COVID response. And I think some of the solutions we're putting forward that we have proven out in Ireland in an Irish context for the last 9-10 years, they are scalable, they're sustainable, and we feel that industry specific but pan-European approach to big industries like the high-tech manufacturing side of things can work. The way you work and the way you make a pharmaceutical product in Ireland, or in Belgrade, or in Rome, or actually in Cape Town, is the same way. The regulations governing globally and certainly at a European context are very, very similar. Therefore, the work practices are quite similar. Therefore, the skills and the competencies are similar. So a pan-European or a global standardization of some of those competencies and skills is absolutely possible. So I think that's important. In terms of some of the stats, I said I'd put these up in red. Doesn't mean they're scary, but it just means they're very important. We're talking about over 2.1 million people working in the biopharma sector alone. 10 million people working in high-tech manufacturing. Over 34 million people working in manufacturing jobs. That's huge. I think that's. I think I've got a stat in a while. It could be 20% of our working people in Europe, something like that. Over 1 million vacancies, which is amazing, across Europe right now in digital technology industries. So that's important. And the EU Commission in that industry strategy document towards 2030 talked about over 120 million people will need to upskill or reskill over the next 5 years. So that's their key stats that shape the scale of the challenge in a European context, and also the urgency that comes with that, because the need for that upskilling is now. If you look at the industrial evolution and where it is going, and what I alluded to in my introduction, the impact of that will be logarithmic compared to what we've seen right now. The impact we've seen up to now has more been on a social level, how we connect, how we talk right now, how we get work done at mostly a social level and a little bit of business in terms of communication. But in terms of the industrialization and how we manufacture products over the next decade and 2 decades will be unrecognizable. And with disruption comes risk, but also comes opportunity. The risk is that we don't get ahead of the Industry 4.0 curve, the automation curve. And we don't invest in the technologies, and we don't invest in the skills. And that means Europe will lose further competitiveness in that space. The opportunity is that not only can we retain the manufacture of these high-end products in Europe and really good jobs for our citizens, but we could potentially bring back some really key, the manufacture of key products from a European perspective, like active pharmaceutical ingredients, so the initial white powder that gets made to go into the tablets, for example, and a lot of it would get manufactured outside of Europe right now because of the affordabilities that we can't be competitive enough to manufacture in Europe. And we've seen during COVID the supply chain challenges around that decision to manufacture those products outside of Europe. So within that industrial strategy document, they talk about sovereignty as well, and maintaining of our sovereignty, and for key products like medicines, there's an argument we could potentially bring home some of that, and that's something that has been actively stated by governments, by the Commission, and I think there's a strategy document to be published later this year. So there is a sense of urgency around all of this in terms of the impact that Industry 4.0 will have, and the need for significant investment in this space. But the great thing is, it also is a way to help us achieve our green goals, as well as finding new ways of working. The era of everyone going into a factory and making the product all in there at the same time is disappearing, and we see it post-COVID. So now we're looking at new ways of working, like we are now engaging in from an office environment, but in a manufacturing environment, people can conduct maybe a third of their tasks ahead of time from home or remotely in an office environment, pushing the data and the instruction to the machines. They have to go in maybe to conduct 1/3 of their activities, but then the final third could, an analysis of data, looking at the results, can be done off-site as well. So there are new ways of manufacturing, new ways of working that can be made possible through investment in Industry 4.0 technologies and the skills that are needed to make that happen. And so policy, it's safe to say, is not lagging. I would like to say that they are being quite on top of it, but action is next. So, you know, it is great, be it for the industrial strategy document, which talks about the 34 million people working in manufacturing and the need to upskill to, half of our workforce, 120 million over the next 5 years. The European Green Deal, it talks about, it states that digital technologies and Industry 4.0 are critical enablers for attaining the sustainability goals of the Green Deal. And also it talks about, in order to make all the changes referenced in the Green Deal possible, proactive reskilling and upskilling are necessary. Not only to make those manufacturing sectors more competitive, but also to transition people from, high carbon industries over to lower carbon industries, and help them with that skills transition to get jobs in those other sectors. And I guess a lot of our speakers today will talk about some of this. I know that Finbar will talk about some of the general skills, the future skills that are needed that could help that transition. And Orla will talk about case studies and examples of how we do it and the transition and how it works. From the most recent publication by the General Secretariat of the Council on reskilling and upskilling, it's a really well written document, and it's well structured, well thought out. And I like comments like, I know it comes from the skills agenda document, but it talks about, for individuals, their knowledge, skills and competencies are a pathway to personal development, active citizenship, employability, well-being, prosperity and personal growth. And that's true, and we see it every day and every year in what we do. When people are empowered with the right skills to get the right job, they're happy, and that's good, and that's what we want. And it also, that document also talks about to continue working on tailor-made approaches to lifelong learning. The one size fits all approach does not work, and we will talk around that. And it also talks about to explore possible models for public and private financing of that lifelong learning approach. So in terms of what we're proposing, just at a very high level, we're definitely proposing that the approach to skills needs to be large. Any of the skill studies that have been done to back up the industry strategy document and beyond talk about the time for tokenistic investment in multiple small projects across countries is gone. They don't have impact. There needs to be large scale, sustainable, cross industry, across border approaches to upskilling, because we're talking about mobility of labor as well. If you get upskilled in one country for a role, you have the rights and you want to have the skills to work in a similar role in another country. So to give that mobility is key. So recognition of industry certified, with competency-based programs is key. And we feel that's scalable, based on what we see happening in Ireland and based on the scales of the industries we're talking about. There is a real opportunity to have significant impact, like numbers like, over a 5-year period, you could upskill over, 500,000 people doing this, and have an impact on these sectors that employ over 20 million people. So that's possible, and it is the coming together of the industries with the higher education institutions, coupled with the citizens and government, to develop those solutions, but also more importantly, to implement them. So I guess in summary, the challenge we have ahead of us is immense. I think we're only coming out of the COVID shock. The impact is still to be realized, and the requirement to transition people from significantly impacted sectors like retail, services in general, and to move them into industries where there are still roles and good jobs it needs to be a focus of member states, and it needs to be a focus of the Commission and the Council. But the great thing is investment in these types of skills that we're speaking about also helps us achieve those competitiveness goals that we're talking about, as well as the green agenda. And also to help it become more resilient in terms of how we manufacture products in the future, and to be more robust next time round post-COVID. And Europe has always been that home of industry, and I think there's a role for Europe to show leadership in terms of upholding and exemplifying those global trading values. And in a world that's potentially gone mad, there's a role for Europe to show how we can manufacture, we can trade with our friends in other continents, and do it in a respectful way. We can see the needs for our citizens in terms of skills and digitalization, and we can give them those skills to help them find new jobs and to retain jobs. So I think there's a role for Europe to show that leadership at a global level as well. And we feel kind of the proposals that we're putting forward are realistic, but they're scalable and they're sustainable. That's the key thing. So that's kind of it from me. I look forward to the remainder of the discussion and any questions that might come in. Thank you again to all the speakers for participating today, and for the participants as well. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. That was very informative, and really in your discussion, you highlighted the policy context. You've referred to a number of important policy documents and discussions. Yeah, and that's vital, because I mean, what we're looking forward to in the future is, I suppose, to understand what will the policy direction look like at national level, at EU level, at a more global level. And then, of course, the synergies between different policies. So I'm therefore, of course, delighted that we have Karina Angelieva with us today. She is the Deputy Science Minister in Bulgaria. You're very welcome, Karina. And Karina has had in various forms a very long and distinguished leadership career in science and innovation at EU level. For example, the success of the Bulgarian Council presidency in the area of science under her leadership. So absolutely delighted to have you here, Karina, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Declan, and thank you very much, Jan, for the nice presentation. It was a very good introduction. First, can you hear me well, or I should talk louder? Okay, thank you very much, because sometimes there is a problem. I see already that there are questions, which is also wonderful. Now, first, let me thank Declan for the nice words and introduction. I'm happy to be part of this team today during this seminar. Of course, I will talk from the point of view of my position, but please allow me also to share with you some views that I have also from my personal and professional background, not only as a Deputy Minister of Education and Science. So I think that we should be focused today, and really I think that Declan put it very right, today's topics on skills and some better links with innovation and high tech, because of course, talking about skills agenda, we should be all aware that when you're talking for reskilling and upskilling, it also matters different industry sectors. Of course, it matters a lot unemployment, and moreover now with this COVID-19 crisis, unfortunately, we are also talking again also not for unemployment, but disruptions of different sectors and increasing of poverty, and most probably we are expecting a new wave of brain drain, being of highly skilled people, but also of low skill. So the politicians usually has a very difficult choice where to direct. Of course, the funding should be to more inclusive policies targeting migrants, socially deprived, and with lower economic background people, or social disadvantages people. Or they should target their investments in high-tech sectors and investing, of course, in the topic where I feel I can swim better when we're talking for talented and people and researchers. The choice is very difficult, and usually we are looking for a balance. Now, what I wanted a little bit to challenge you today is that we try to avoid this political talk, but propose maybe some concrete measures how we can basically upscale and pull this European pool of talents, and how we can attract basically highly skilled people in Europe, but also how we can motivate our new Europeans and the younger generation to take on this difficult career. And I think really that Jana made very clear several points. One of them, and maybe the most important, is basically how we set up our educational and skills agendas on national, regional, institutional level, and also on European, because for me a big question last years is maybe this gap that we have, and the gap is basically between first between the education and higher education, and then between the higher education and the research career path. So very often, and basically recently, I monitored that we are relying on boosting researchers' career through some mechanisms such as Maria Curie, for example, or EIT, European Institute of Technology. But this is really a very a small share of what basically we can do. 2 years ago, we proposed on European level to discuss how we can basically boost career development of researchers, and how we can be more flexible when we talk for career path. Because so far, member states are considering, of course, researchers after receiving their PhDs. But this is creating this gap I'm talking. Very often we are missing to attract, to motivate students that have skills, interest, motivation, and knowledge. Let's not forget. We are missing to attract them to take on this difficult career path, even in the biopharmaceutical sectors. So usually what is happening, and now I think we are on a very important moment in our policies, but also basically as a society, as a European society, is that last years we are monitoring a new wave of brain drain. The brain drain wave of talented people is going first place to the industry. In Bulgaria, basically this is pharmaceutical sector, which is good. It's good that we are feeding basically the industry with highly skilled personnel. But secondly, now we are monitoring again a new brain drain wave from the periphery to more, let's say, welfare countries in Europe, usually in Western Europe, or abroad, in the States mainly. and some other countries such as Canada and Japan and China recently. What does it mean? It means that, of course, we are draining whole sectors where we expect the new generation of teachers to train the next generation of people you need. So I believe that we need really to reconsider this partnership between the business and the education sector on one hand, and really to reconsider and to push forward the next funding instruments on European level. To be more flexible and to create new mechanisms to allow young people to keep and to develop their skills, also being in research and not necessarily only and for the sake of industrial application. Don't understand me wrongly. Of course, one of the most important missions nowadays of universities and of research is to support the competitiveness of the economy and to support growing up new businesses where we have new jobs and employment, of course. But what we are worried is basically the aging of the teaching staff, the mentors and the training. And here we can't manage ourselves. The public institutions will not be able, including in this regard, the higher education universities, they won't be able to manage themselves to produce, so to speak, the best set of skills and basically to produce the necessary quantity. Because I think also Jan touched upon this. It's not only, of course, about the quality we are looking, but we also need a quantity of highly skilled people in Europe. And one of the solutions I see is, of course, the partnership with the business. We need a much more flexible regulation on a national and European level, of course, taking into consideration all the challenges and the important aspects of education and for education institutions, but we should also allow really more involvement of industry and businesses also to participate in providing competence-based, skill-based and performance-based training programs. More and more, of course, we need to attract also industry representatives and innovators and people that are not necessarily having their professional career path in education institutions to involve in education. But this new partnership so far is working very well in most of the countries, but what I think is working more on, let's put it in this way, more on a short-term base, when a particular industry has an interest, or in a more targeted way, when a particular company has an interest to work with the university and train their own pool of people. What I'm talking about is basically to think about new programs, new funding instruments where we engage industry like a cluster. So basically people from the industry that are ready to take on or hop on a new career pattern, such as mentorship or really as a trainees of a new generation of people that are not necessarily linked to this particular company. This can happen, of course, but only if feel a little bit more relaxed about the actors that are providing basically skills and training in the system, and we are not so much protective of the institutions. And secondly, of course, if we unite around the idea that we need, of course, much more ambitious funding and agenda on highly skilled people, because my belief is that through more investments in researchers and talented people, basically we can make this avalanche effect and create more knowledge circles in the society and basically attract more and more other young people that are now not only deprived basically from education, but I have to tell you that they lack the motivation to study. Because what is the problem nowadays? There is really lack of interest even in the society. I must say we are not touching today, we don't have the time to touch upon the topic of how the parents, the society look at the career path of the young generation. And very often, this is nothing new, of course, it also happened in 20 years ago and 40 and so on. I mean, when we were growing up, of course, everyone is looking on one point of view their kids to be happy, on the other, of course, sometimes not to bother too much in life, but to receive high salaries. And here is the second element. Very often I see that we are missing to discuss on in the council or on European high level circles, really to see how we can boost the motivation, but also the stimulus, including remuneration and payments for young researchers. Because let's be honest here today, when we talk for STEM disciplines, but not only, also there are other disciplines such as a linguistic sector or cultural heritage sectors such as anthropology and so on. One needs basically more than 7-8 years to build the necessary skills, and then at least 5 more years to fine-tune them. So this is it's not happening for 1-2 years. We need investments, and the young people need investments at least 10 years in training. And you can imagine that in nowadays, the dynamism and transformation of societies, of course, the young generation is very much reluctant to invest their own time. And what still I monitor money, because many of these programs are still paid, or they're not accessible to many people who have to take grants, then the choice in life is quite difficult. So I believe that we really should foster this. One of my ideas last years is, of course, linked to Horizon 2020 and the next framework program, Horizon Europe. I see that there is already question on Horizon 2020 on the transferable skills. Thank you very much for this question. This was also one proposal I tried to launch, but it's very difficult to find support. Why we have in all research projects absolutely a must to invest in ethical rules, to invest in gender balance, now to invest in open access to data. Why we don't have the must rule to basically have in the collaborative projects, in the research projects, students and masters, not only PhDs and postdocs. They also should be allowed to participate, to join these projects and to be paid. Even I must say that when we are talking for evaluation of those projects, we should have a criteria to assess the collaborative research projects, how much they also target and how much they contribute to new patterns of skills, and how they basically upgrade and impact the skills agenda in the particular sector, including in these collaborative researches, new training models, patterns, and skills for young people. And this, for the moment, the easiest answer, of course, is we have Erasmus to cover till PhD. From PhD, we have Horizon. I think that we have to get rid of sometimes of this way of silos thinking and to create bridges. Now, here we have to really acknowledge, I hope most of you are following what is happening of this new initiative, European University Networks. I'm sure that you are aware of this. Maybe this is a very good signal, because the European University Networks have been funded under Erasmus+, and basically the idea is that we scale up this initiative in Horizon Europe. Okay, this is a very good idea. I think basically much more investments have to be made in Marie Curie, but also new bridges have to be with Erasmus Plus. And basically Erasmus Plus program should be, especially in this post-COVID crisis, where we have unfortunate quite a lot of disturbances of mobility of people, we should basically invest in new skills agendas in different sectors. So first of my ideas was, of course, about this. I told you to involve younger people, students in research already first and second year. And of course, my second call is for the investments in new teaching programs for researchers. Because what we have now is, I have to tell you, are monitoring very well how our entrepreneurial sector is developing and innovators. It's amazing. We have a pool of fantastic young entrepreneurs. And in the parallel road, we have the young researchers. And it's amazing to see these two different worlds. So the same age, the same motivation and interest, and totally different skills. I believe that we need to link a little bit more and to create some common interest between these two worlds of entrepreneurship and researchers. Because very often we see that after the first successful years of young entrepreneurs, then they very often suffer of new lack of ideas. I don't know who of you is very much involved in research, but basically this is recently again on the agenda, this battle between fundamental and applied science. And I have to tell you that I am a strong believer that we can't have innovations if we don't fuel these innovations with great ideas and dreams that are stemming from fundamental science. So very often we see how innovation or startup companies are drying out because they lack of new ideas, or they basically lack of knowledge, of deeper knowledge in some fields. And on the opposite side, we of course see the world of young researchers that get demotivated of lack of realization of ideas, lack of understanding of big data, of artificial intelligence. They don't, very often they don't have any digital skills and understanding how to cope with this world. And at the end of the day, of course, they see lack of realization in their career because the remuneration is very low. So, of course, I was very intrigued to participate today in this seminar to see a little bit and to hear a little bit more ideas how we can modernize the teaching and the training programs in universities. I believe very strong in the digitalization of as a tool for modernization of the training agendas, and I believe that we should prepare very strongly for the world of artificial intelligence, which in 2 sentences I can transfer like this, that basically in all fields we need to have basic digital competencies, understanding of big data, understanding of open access, and understanding of the integrity and ethical and aspects of dealing with data, because this is not just, of course, using a computer and one software to compare all data. It's much more, and I like this touch in the previous presentation. Of course, the most difficult part when we are talking for this high-tech skills agenda and how we can foster the industrial competitiveness of Europe is this touch with the society. There is too much talks about open science to society, how we should basically involve citizens into this talk, but in the same time there is not a lot that have been done, because It's completely different when you want to invest in highly skilled people to develop really competitive research and innovation, and then to explain this or to attract citizens and tell them you should invest your taxes more and more in areas where it's not exactly evident what will be the impact on your life. This is a very difficult, another trend. But what I believe that we should go back, it's nothing new. I'm not inventing the warm water, and maybe with this I will conclude. Basically, this COVID crisis totally disrupted our education systems. I don't know how much you are following this, but of course you're very much aware that last 4 months we were basically online education. And you can't imagine how much now we basically discuss and we unite with our member states, with different social economical standards. Doesn't matter with richer or poorer regions. The conclusion is overall basically the same. That of course it very much depends on the teacher, not on the computer or the online resources, to motivate kids to study. And basically one of the solutions we see, all the politicians are now working in the education field, is that maybe one of the, let's say, recipe, if we stay at home, we move to blended education, is basically to invest more in approach to motivate, of course, the kids to strive for more knowledge and to basically to keep in touch and to be motivated to learn, because it was very evident that the basic competencies very easily are acquired at home. Even there is a tendency now, the young generation, they don't want to go back to school. But let's not forget that the skills can survive on their own. When we are talking for high-tech skills nowadays, and Jan said it very rightly, we are talking also for working in international environment. One should be able to explain well and to communicate well with different nationalities, with different people with different cultural and religious background. So the social skills are extremely important also nowadays. And of course, emotional and behavioral skills. At the end of the day, this matters also a lot. So, Declan, I don't know what exactly was your expectation. To me, the topic is extremely important. As I said, I believe that we should urge much more the politicians to go out of their shell, you know. It shouldn't be anymore that we hide behind the rule that this is upon to national sovereignty, the education and the training. Not at all. I think that we should be more brave and basically to discuss really not only how much and we should invest and in skills and in modernization and partnership between all the actors for training and reskilling people, but I think that we should be a bit more brave to look for total new pathways, so that to foster and to use everyone in our society that can contribute to training and transferring first knowledge to people, and secondly, of course, how we can scale up the digital skills so that in a really short-term time, we have everywhere in Europe understanding and standards for working in big data, open access, and basically scaling up the transferable skills of the young generation, of next generation of entrepreneurs and researchers and citizens overall. So I'm ready to first to listen to the rest, and of course, if there are any questions, to have a discussion. I think it's better to keep it now to here.
Wonderful, Karina. That's most helpful and extremely important. And I think for the purposes of this conversation, it's just wonderful to have this perspective that you have of a minister. And I think the way you view things is very important for us to understand. So in that vein, now we will move to our next speaker, Finbar Sheehy, Director of Program Development at Innopharma. Finbar, you can hear me?
Yes, Declan, you can hear me okay?
It's all yours.
Perfect. I'm just going to share a screen if I can. Good morning. As Declan said, my name is Finbar Sheehy. I'm delighted to be with you this morning. I'm Director for Academic Programs within Innopharma, and what I want to talk about is future skills and competencies in a digital age. In fact, what I'm going to talk about is skills in any age, really. And the context of what I want to talk about is kind of the following. Within Innopharma, we've been developing education programs for mature learners, from operators right up to engineers and beyond, for the last 10 years plus. And there are obvious technological, analytical, business skills, competencies that we can identify that have been very, very important and have served us well, I suppose, in the past. But what I want to do is I want to propose another set of competencies that I think are fundamental in today's digital and technological environment. I think these competencies, if we don't grasp these competencies and build these on what's already there, I think we're going to lose a huge opportunity. We're in the space of technology, we're in the space of manufacturing, we're in the space of the utilization of data. And when you look at all of those processes, fundamentally what we're talking about here is connected technologies, technologies that measure things, that control processes. So if you're talking about competencies, obviously you have to develop people's competencies in those areas. Data is a huge part of what we do and will become a bigger part of what we do in the future. So obviously the ability to collect, to clean, to store, to serve, all of that data is important. And then the ability to make sense of it, analyze it, convert that data into something that's of value add. And having data and not presenting it is of no use. So we have to be able to come up with this way of present data. And again, we have to be able to present it in such a way that the relevant audience can analyze it, make sense of it, make decisions, make actions. So whatever programs are out there, they're the obvious core skills that you would design a program. So if you're designing education in manufacturing, or if you're designing education in data and data analytics, they would be the obvious things you would be thinking of. So teach people about manufacturing, teach people about quality, compliance, business reasons why you would do all of these things. You would need to teach them about data, things like business excellence, how do you drive improvement, strategy, change management, and research, for example. And whether it's an operator, whether it's an engineer, whether it's a researcher, all of these skills are important. But what I want to talk about is I think there's another set of skills out there that are just as important, that we have to be able to develop. And within Innopharma, we've been recognizing these skills, I think, for many years, and we've been really trying to push these skills. And this is the model, I suppose, of how I would represent these skills. And I want to spend a few minutes talking about each one of these. I want to talk about the competence of being able to make valid and value judgments. I want to talk about the competence of being adaptable and agile, the ability to take risks and to be resilient, for example, the competence of empathy and integrity, optimism and contribution, and also self-awareness. And what I would argue is these competencies are fundamentally important. So I want to spend a small bit of time looking at each one of these. The first one, to me, is phenomenally important in the current environment. And it seems very, very obvious, but it's a competency I think we're losing. It's the ability to look at something and say, that makes sense. Or the ability to look at something and say, that doesn't make sense. We're talking about technology, and technology is good, but technology doesn't always mean that it's going to be good. It's always going to be useful. Smart technology is not always smart. Just because we can do it doesn't necessarily mean to say we should do it. We've seen in the last few months, I would argue, an abundance of data and an abundance of science, an abundance of technology. And in some ways, it's been presented incorrectly, it's been misrepresented. Just because something is published, just because something is written down, doesn't mean say it's true. Just because something has data behind it doesn't necessarily mean it's causal. We know that 73.6% of all statistics are made up. I know that's a fact because I saw it on a T-shirt somewhere. Just because something is in a graph doesn't mean to say it's valid. There is this huge acceptance, and I would argue misrepresentation of data out there these days. And we need to get back to this idea of giving people the confidence and the expectation of understanding and questioning the source of data. And just because you question something doesn't mean to say you disagree with it, you just want to understand it. So how do we commission things? How do we collect things? Understand that there are different agendas out there. Not saying any of them are right or wrong, but it's important to understand those things. So that ability to look at something and challenge it and make sense and say, is that right or is that wrong? Even from a younger generational perspective, understanding the consequences of our actions is very, very important. So take something like media literacy, for example. When we sign up for something, what are we actually signing up for? When is the last time that people read terms and conditions about signing up for a particular application online, for example? We know that free doesn't mean free. If we buy something and it's unlimited, we know it's not unlimited. We read things like the product is guaranteed against all forms of damage as per the terms and conditions, but we never read the terms and conditions. And we always know if it's free, you're probably the product. So in terms of valid judgment, we need to have this ability to go back to being curious again. And some of you, I'm sure, have come across Ken Robinson, phenomenal individual in the areas of education. And he talked about this idea that, we're all born curious. The challenge is how do we remain curious as we get educated out of it? And it is acceptable and it is essential that we become curious in terms of what we're doing and we get back to being curious. And like I said, curious is understanding where something comes from. The other competence I would say is hugely important. And again, we've seen this very much in the last few months, the ability to be adaptable, the ability to be agile, the ability to work on our own, the ability to work with different people, different cultures, different time zones. Up to now, we've talked about the ability to work outwards, but all of a sudden, the ability to be able to work from home is a huge competency. I have this vision at this stage, we'll sit down and we'll design our homes in the future. And we spend all our time designing kitchens, but what we're now going to be doing is we're going to be designing our home office. Because every one of us, realistically, whether we like it or not, as part of our home, is we're going to work from home. So that ability is important. I have no doubt, even when we look at job descriptions in the future, one of the competencies that people will look for within individuals is the ability to work from home, the ability to be able to do that. The concept of transdisciplinarity, I think, is a fundamental complement or a competency that's important as well. The ability to transfer skills from one discipline to another discipline, whether it's finance, engineering. But if you look at how education has traditionally been structured, I do a degree in finance. I learn something in engineering, for example. I do something in biology. But life isn't like that. Life is a combination of all of these different things. There's a very, very interesting problem-solving technique out there called TREES. It's a Russian acronym. It's a theory of inventive problem-solving. And it's based on this idea that every problem that we already have has already been solved somewhere else. So if you want to educate people on solving problems in your area, don't educate them about things in your area. You have to educate them about things in other areas. It's almost like, imagine if you have a toolbox, and if the only tool you have in the toolbox is a hammer, then allegedly everything is going to look like a nail. We're going to treat everything in the same way. So this idea of learning skills in lots of different areas is fundamentally important. And I think the more skills we have, the better. The more capability we have, the better. If you look at somebody like Leonardo da Vinci, why was he so successful? He was an artist, he was a sculptor, he was a doctor, he was a philosopher, he was an astronomer, he was so many different things. And that experience, that transdisciplinarity made him successful. Agility, the ability to change, the ability to be reborn, for example, manage ambiguity and disruption. Again, we've seen it in the last few months. The companies, the individuals who had that ability to fundamentally change what they were doing were the ones who survived. And also when you look at a lot of the business models that are out there, a lot of the business models are based on stability. They're based on having stable supply chains, for example. All of a sudden, that doesn't work anymore. We have to have models that make sense, that build disruption into them, good disruption and bad disruption. So we have to have this ability to transform ourselves. This idea of getting education and getting a job, and education stopping as soon as you get a job, no longer exists. Education is for life. And the best way, I would say, to be agile is to be educated. And the more education you have, the more diverse it is, the more agile I think you would become. I would also say the competence of taking risks and to be resilient are hugely important. We shouldn't be frightened about doing things wrong, but at the moment there is the sense of if you do something wrong, it's wrong, and there's a negative consequence. And if we're not prepared to be wrong, the argument is we'll never ever come up with anything that's of any value. We'll never come up with original ideas. Arguably, you can only understand what right is if you understand what wrong is. And we should reward learning from taking risks. You know, innovation and understanding, for example, are based on the ideas of learned failure. So if something happens, we do it in a safe environment, and we should be able to learn from that. And where do we recognize failure in our educational systems? Because if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're wrong, you fail. If you're wrong, you fail, you don't pass. So we have to think about that. We have to allow, we have to allow people to fail. We have to force people to fail. And then we have to say, what did you learn from that? With failure comes things like resilience, determination. We have to be able to push ourselves to get an outcome. And the ability to stick at something, and you just can't give up and say, I've tried really, really hard, it didn't really work. That determination, I think, is a really important competency as well we need to have. Technology is good. Technology does good things. But whatever we do, the competency of empathy and integrity are just as important. We need to understand the impact of what we're doing. You know, Ian mentioned the green agenda earlier on. There's lots of things we do out there that technology can influence, but we have to be able to understand what's the consequence. You know, we have to be aware of the feelings, the emotions of other people. And we need to be able to experience those things from their perspective. We need to understand the impact in terms of what we're doing. Again, in terms of empathy, we also need to act with integrity. We need to understand, we need to do the right thing. We need to be truthful. We need to be honest. We need to be accountable. We need to be responsible. We need to be inclusive. We need to have other people involved in our decisions. That, again, is a competency, and not just be single-minded in terms of what we're trying to do. I would say competencies in terms of optimism and making a contribution are equally important. Anybody can tell you all the reasons why something can't be done. We all know that attitude is everything. If you hire somebody, I will hire somebody for attitude off the plans straight away. Skill you can teach, but attitude is something that's really, really important to develop that. And again, it's about getting things done. It's about being proactive. It's about being optimistic, but it's also about being realistic as well. And it's about always trying to move towards a solution. You won't always find that it's a direct path. Sometimes you have to go backwards to go forward. Sometimes you have to go sideways. Sometimes you have to try different things. But it's about doing all of those things ultimately to move forward and make a contribution. That, again, is a competency I would argue is very important. All of the ones I talked about, if you don't have this one, arguably the other ones don't matter. Because if you're not aware, it doesn't really matter. So self-awareness as a competency. And some of these things are things you need to sit down and think about. You know, what do you mean by self-awareness? It's that ability to be able to see ourselves clearly, to understand who we are and understand how other people see us. And when I talk about self-awareness, if you think about language like, you know, consciousness, being cognizant of something, being mindful, being alert, for example, to me, I suppose it's all about being awake. Because arguably a lot of people go through life in a trance. You know, how did I get here? Where am I going? Where's my future? What skills do I need? Do I just go with the flow? So being self-aware, being cognizant of what's going on out there and cognizant of the world, and being cognizant of where I take my information, where I take my knowledge, how do I make value judgment of all of those things is important. And then spending time and reflecting and being introspective to figure out, well, where do I go? What do I need to do in future? What skills do I need? And all of that ultimately has to lead to action. Because, you know, if we don't do it, if we just have ideas, if we don't have action, arguably that's not going to be any use. So sitting back and being aware, having a vision in terms of where we want to go and converting that into action is fundamentally important. So in summary, I would describe these competencies are things that are just as important as about technical skills and problem solving skills and all of these. And these skills apply across the board. Like I said, whether you're operating at an operator level in a factory, whether you're an engineer, whether you're involved in research, whether you're involved in any aspects of what's going on. Life is transversal. Life is made up of lots of different things. Business is transversal. Therefore, education should be transversal as well. We shouldn't be focusing on one aspect, one discipline. Education should be about everything and the interrelationship with everything. And I would argue that, true intelligence is about that ability to be able to adapt. More so now in the future. We have no idea what's going to happen in the future, but all we know is it's going to happen at an exponential rate. So this idea of questioning, and questioning doesn't mean disagreeing. Questioning means being curious. Questioning means trying to understand. Then the ability to be able to reflect and say, what do I learn? What can I find out from this? What's useful from this? And then it's about making decisions, but it's about making ethical decisions as well. It's about making decisions that are in integrity. And I'd leave you with this quote. I would say that, technology out there has the ability to do great things. I think our role in terms of education, in terms of competence, in terms of skills, is to be able to develop those competencies in people that use technology to design products that are ethical, services that are ethical, that add value to mankind. So the piece I suppose I would like to leave you with this morning is those core competencies, particularly this idea of value judgment, to be able to look at something and make sense. To me is probably one of the most fundamental things. We just accept too many things for granted these days. If we accept those things in our personal life, we're going to accept those things in our business lives, and that's going to be a fundamental problem for you. So I'll leave you with those thoughts this morning. More than happy to answer any questions as they come along or any questions towards the end. Thank you.
Many thanks, Finbar. That was very informative and I think stimulated curiosity. Thank you for that. And now I will go to our next speaker. We are very pleased to have with us today Marina De Soli from Apre in Italy, and she will talk to us on skills and the European Union and competitiveness.
So good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for the very inspiring presentation before mine. I think that most of what I wanted to say has been already said, but I really would like to thank especially Finbar, because I think that this is something that should really be taken into account together with personal development. That is something that is anyway, in a way, lacking still also in the policies that are starting to highlight, like these T-shaped skills. But I think that it is very, very important, and I think that also every company should have a presentation like this. Just 2 words to introduce myself. I have been the national contact point for industrial technologies for many, many years now, from FP6, from Program 6, 7, and Horizon 2020. And now I'm following also the work of Horizon Europe and Cluster 4, that is the new cluster on digital industry and space. And that's why I have this presentation, but I would like to be very quick on this because most of it has already been tackled, but maybe I would like to reflect a little bit on how this will be probably mainstreamed in Horizon Europe and which are specific destination on this. I don't have slides on this. So we all know basically the data. We also know that most of it with the pandemics have changed, not the needs of industry, but of course all the forecast and how the industry is going to respond to these to the pandemics. anyways, we know that especially post-COVID, automation is going to be more and more important, and that we need all these new set of skills, and also these cross-boundary skills. The real problem that we have and we are aware of is that the 42% of EU firms report a lack of skilled workers, and this is really one of the main challenges that we face right now, and still in 2019, and probably even more in the coming years. And also that EU manufacturing firms report a lacking of workers with right skills, not only digital skills, but really the right skills for the specific topic. And also that due to this, they are not really able to innovate effective, to stay competitive, and also that the people costs are rising more than expected because there is also an investment needed. So the EU firms 8 out of 10 find that there is a limited availability of skilled staff, and that is really impeding investment in the future in innovation, and so it's impeding growth. That's why I think that what is important on the new industrial strategy is that Europe is really calling industry into action. With this new industrial strategy is asking industry to also co-invest. It's declaring that actually Europe will be behind industry during this transition towards climate neutrality, digital leadership, and also with the will of having this technological sovereignty of Europe that is more and more important, and as we learned also during the pandemic. We know that the European industry accounts for 35 million jobs, and 99% of these firms are small, medium and sized businesses, so SMEs, that might have really difficulties in innovating and also in upskilling their workers. So the European Commission is actually asking the industry to become greener, more circular and more digital, and they launched 3 main policies to achieve this. We all know about the European Green Deal to become the first climate neutral continent by 2050, and to do so we also know that with the new low carbon economy it is expected to create more than 1 million jobs by 2030, and of course we need to train them. Also for global competitiveness, the European Commission is really focusing a lot in giving the opportunities to innovators to bring their idea into the arena. So it is really a focus also on the people. We have seen this already in Horizon 2020 with the launch of the European Innovation Council that has started this path that we will see even more in a bigger scale in Horizon Europe, where at the center we have the innovator, not the company, but really the person in a way. Just like as in the European Research Council, the researcher is at the center. So it is really a way to help the innovator to bring their ideas to the market, and doing so also allowing the idea to grow within a single market that has a specific global standards that make then the opportunity to this idea to be taken up to a big market, and actually setting these global standards, also having other countries outside Europe to adopt our standards and making the way for this idea and to this product or services to the rest of the world. So really to support the global competitiveness. Again, it is important to support also the skills of innovators, and this is also the object of the specific programs that we will see in the future. And of course, the digital transition. So we know that digital technologies are really changing the face of industry. And we know also that we are now in the Industry 0.4 moment, but the Commission is already since 2 years talking about Industry 5.0. 5.0 because we are start really looking into the relation between the digital and, for example, the robots and the human component. So all these working together, it needs also the development of different skills that are exactly the skills that Finbar presented in the previous presentation. Because we will need also to keep our values, to be able to take fast decisions and to work together with technology that must be really considered as an enabler. So if we want to have just a screenshot on how the new industrial strategy is, the steps that they want to take, it is, of course, we want to have a deeper and more digital single market that will help will help the uphold the uptaking of new ideas, to upholding a global level in a global level playing field. So really to also invest on standards, to support industry towards climate neutrality and of course a digital twin economy, to build a more circular economy, but especially there is a huge focus on skilling and reskilling. And how is the Commission willing to making it happen? To have an update skills agenda for Europe, including this recommendation on vocational and education and training. And we've seen that part of this document have been already published the 1st of July, as presented by Ian before, to launch this European Pact for Skills. In this case, we would see all different stakeholders, from the member states to industry to university, in a really a private-public partnership to make it happen. So to have really the opportunity to work together in this with an important role of industry as a trainer, but also as an investor. Also, we are expecting a communication of European education area and digital education action plan. And also very important are all the investment that the European Commission is doing since many years for the implementation of the EU gender strategy. There is a new one that has been adopted in March 2020, but we know that the Commission in the past 10 years especially has been investing a lot to encourage women to study science, technology, engineering and mathematics, so all the STEM careers, and also to invest in digital skills, improving the gender balance. This is also really part of all of the communication, for example, of the AI, ethics and AI, and how we need really to mainstream gender issue also within technology. And this is what the European Commission has been doing really consistently in the past years. But we know that post-COVID we have had specific statements and recommendation and documents published by the European Commission. So actually, we know that there is the pursuit of a real paradigm shift in skills, especially to support the recovery after the pandemics. And so beside, of course, the strengthening of the sustainable competitiveness as already declared in the European Green Deal, it is very important to ensure the social fairness. We know that especially during the pandemics, also when we are talking about the job forces, who has been hit worse has been the less protected parts of the population. So it is important, so the less skilled workers as well. So to put into practice the first principle of the European Pillar of Social Rights, it is really to give access to education, training and lifelong learning to everybody and everywhere in Europe. And also to build resilience to react to crisis basis really on the lessons that we have learned. But these are not only declarations, because in the documents that have been published, we see that we had skills really mentioned everywhere, and also and especially in the recovery plan for Europe, where the EU investment in skills within the recovery plan budget will go, and we are talking about billions of euro in investment, to the European Social Fund Plus, to Erasmus, InvestEU, European Globalization Adjustment Fund, European Solidarity Corps, and Digital Europe. You can see that this, especially in the case of Digital Europe, probably is going to be a top-up to the already planned investment. So it is important to see that actually the European Commission is really having a consistent investment in skills in many different areas. So I'm sorry I don't have a slide for this, but actually I wouldn't be allowed to publish it because there are just now, you know, we are in the process of defining, finalizing the strategic planning for Horizon Europe, and in defining the first work programs. So the shadow committees for Horizon Europe, where the member states are negotiating the text with the European Commission, are meeting in these weeks. A novelty from the last the strategic committee was that actually the German presidency is willing to finalize the negotiation on Horizon Europe, and that means that we might expect to have a consolidated text by December, where actually we were expecting to have the first call starting in March, April, but maybe we will make it by the 1st of January, and this is good news. And you know that Horizon Europe has been designed in a completely different way from the past. So it is now a totally impact-oriented program that has been co-designed also with all the stakeholders and also with the citizens, with very many consultations, and with really the will to co-create something together. And being impact-oriented meant that the program has been built around, let's say, it's around 30 main impacts that are needed to tackle the global challenges. And so each work program will be divided in destinations, and within this destination we will have orientations that will become topics. Why I'm saying so? Because destination, it is a higher level, and it means that there will be many different topic calls to be opened, and so we expect a huge investment on these destinations from the European Commission. And when we are talking about cluster 4, that is digital industry and space, there is a specific destination on digital learning technologies, including upskilling of the workforce. So at least for the digital part of it, there is a recognition from the Commission, from the GRTD, from Horizon Europe, that there will be actually a specific investment. So probably this is also the moment to identify which kind of instruments we want and which kind of skills are we talking about, because this, especially for the first 2 years, is going to be negotiated by September, when we know since last year during the Research and Innovation Days that this year will take place from the 24th to the 26th of September. There will be a validation from the public of the new structure of Horizon Europe and of the different content of the calls. So this year is going to be virtual, so I think many of us will have the chance to attend. So I think that for this, I just would like to remind also that for the European Commission in the new industrial strategy, it is very, very important to focus on European industrial ecosystem, so to really bringing together all the crucial players. And this has been already done in many different alliances in the past. And also here we will see that how we are going to implement this Pact for Skills probably also thematically on these different sectors that has been identified as the first to be launched in the coming years. So I've been fast, but of course I am here also to reply question during the question and answer time. Thank you very much.
Martina, thank you so much for that tour de force. And again, your presence here and your perspective comes with, as you say, you know, at least 6 framework programs. So you probably know everything. So thanks indeed for sharing. Most informative. Thank you. Our next speaker is Bonita de Schwart, the Program Manager for Strategic Partnerships for Human Capital Development in South Africa. You're very welcome. So take us away.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share more of an African or South African perspective on skills development, specifically in the area of science, engineering, and technology. Just to give you a bit of background to what I do, I'm a trained astronomer. So I've done my PhD in South Africa, and I've also done a postdoctoral research fellowship at the South African Astronomical Observatory. And after finishing that fellowship, I found that what I'm more interested and passionate about is sharing the knowledge that I have acquired through astronomy and generating a new generation of astronomers. And that is just because currently in South Africa and Africa, we have a very exciting landscape of new infrastructure that is being built on the African continent. And this is world-class instrumentation in astronomy. So through this presentation, I think what I want to do is just give an idea of what the general skills landscape is on the African continent. What are some of the challenges that we are facing, especially in building a knowledge economy? Also give some background as to what type of initiatives we as the South African Radio Astronomy Observatory have implemented in terms of building human capacity in astronomy on the continent. And when we talk about human capacity in the African context, just to give you an idea, back in 2003, when South Africa put in the bid for the Square Kilometre Array project, which is the biggest radio telescope that will be built. And at that time, there was less than 10, what we would say is radio astronomers on the African continent. And the situation, or what it looks like right now, is that there are a number of these professionals now working within South Africa and on the African continent. So I could give some ideas and share some perspectives of what has helped in growing that community on the continent. Okay, so I'm just going to start the presentation. Okay, so just to give some ideas of what the population or the demographics looks like currently in Africa and what those projections are. We talk about Africa having this large population of youth. That is expected to grow quite rapidly in the future, with the current projections being over 830 million youth by 2050. So this is a large number of young people to employ within the next, we could say, the next future years. What the picture currently also looks like is that a majority of this youth are not employed. So the majority of young people are employed what we call the informal sector. And this sector can be very unstable. It usually doesn't contribute much to GDP of the country. Some of the stats that I got from the African Development Bank, that there's about 10 to 12 million youth entering the workforce each year on the continent, with approximately 3 million jobs being created. So there is vast numbers of unemployment that we're currently facing on the continent. And this is just going to get worse within the future if this is not addressed in a sustainable way. And this is also very different to what we see in the EU context. And this is why we find that the South African government and many other African governments through the African Union are looking at ways of how this can be addressed, how science, technology, and innovation programs can specifically help to address some of these challenges facing Africa. And of course, the consequences of this youth unemployment is it just translates into poor working conditions for individuals, migration out of Africa, conflict on the continent. So these are all issues that we are currently facing. So there is this urgent need to help address the youth unemployment on the continent. Okay, so I thought it would be interesting when talking about skills for the fourth industrial revolution and digital skills to show this particular graph, which was taken from the roadmap for digital cooperation. And just to look at where Africa fits in to other regions. And we can see that the level of digital literacy or even internet usage is very low compared to the rest of the world. And this is mainly due to many people not having access to the internet. So there's no infrastructure. Also, data costs on the continent are very high. And things that we take for granted, things like laptops, even cell phones, tablets, many people don't have access to those sorts of technologies. So it poses even more of a challenge to growing a digital literate type of society. So these points I've taken from, well, some of them from the African Union's Science, Technology and Innovation Strategy for Africa. And it just gives some kind of indication where the African Union wants to go in terms of growing a knowledge base of science workers and engineering workers on the continent. So it's providing young people with education, training and skills, preparing them for the new future labor market, increasing the graduates' employability, which we've heard from previous panelists, and their sense of entrepreneurship. So how do we better align the skills and learning outcomes to the labor market demand? And these are specifically for the new type of era that we're going into, which is a digital and green economy. Also, how do we improve access to decent working opportunities? And that is a challenge on the African continent. We've also heard about the brain drain that is prominent on the African continent. And investing into individuals who are just not going to add to the institutional knowledge or knowledge gained on the continent is a challenge in trying to build a knowledge base on the African continent. And then there's also this fostering inclusive lifelong continuous learning, which I think is going to become more prominent as we move into the fourth industrial revolution. Promotion of women in skills, in STI skills, science, technology, and innovation skills. How do we come up with various initiatives that are targeted at women and ensuring that they are included in the digital economy? So these are all very important elements that we want to see when growing a knowledge base on the continent. Now, there are important examples of how skills or having an effective skills development strategy that can be coupled with research infrastructure on the continent can help to develop capacity. And this is quite prominently seen in the case of astronomy, where we have large infrastructure projects such as the Square Kilometre Array that has built a larger base of scientists on the continent. So the question remains is, in moving into a digital and green economy, can this type of model be replicated within the digital and green space? And I think that this is possible if we can come up with the correct or the type of partnerships that we see for developing Africa. I spoke about astronomy, so these are just some different types of astronomy facilities. Astronomy has become quite technologically advanced. So we have either telescopes that can be sent into space. On the left side of all these pictures, you can see the Hubble Space Telescope. On the top panel over there, on the left, we see some more ground-based radio telescopes. That's a 500-meter aperture array in China. The middle picture is the Southern African Large Telescope, which is one of the biggest optical telescopes in South Africa and on the African continent. So these types of infrastructure need to be built in very specific environments, and those type of environments are usually, for a radio telescope, you need a radio quiet area. Those areas are very common, you could say, on the southern part of Africa, which provides very good conditions for building these type of infrastructures. And that's why we find that all this investment has been made into astronomy infrastructure. The types of skills that are needed for astronomy is quite a range of different skills. There's different types of engineers, operators, technicians, and of course your end users are your scientists. This is an artist's impression of what the SKA will look like. So currently we have the precursor instrument, which is situated in the northern parts of South Africa. And it's these dishes, each dish is around 15 meters, that will be distributed in a central area within South Africa, and eventually it will be expanded to other parts of Africa. Right now we have 8 different African partner countries that are part of this project, and this just shows where the other dishes will be situated and who the other partner countries are. So in building science capacity on the continent, we look at training not only South Africans, but also building capacity within these other African countries. And I think we still have a long way to go in building scientists and engineers who will be part, or who will be able to maintain the science infrastructure within those partner countries. So as I said before, when starting the SKA project, there was this demand for how are we as South Africans and Africans going to be able to contribute to more of the maintaining, the operating and the construction of these telescopes. And that's when a human capital development program was established within the SKA project. And this was mainly established to build the expertise within radio astronomy. And these encompassed all the different levels of, you could say, professions. And this just shows all the different, whether it's the technicians at the site itself, or other types of professions such as bricklayers, boilermakers. There's a range of different professions that are needed to maintain the site, as well as astronomers who will be the end users of the actual data that comes from the telescope. So when building a human capital development program, what was important was to use the exciting nature of an astronomy project or a radio astronomy project to create a significant community of astronomers on the continent. As I said before, in 2003, there were less than 10 radio astronomers on the continent, so we had quite a lot of work to do in building that community. And also ensuring that these scientists can work with teams from international universities, so to make the research that is undertaken within institutions in Africa, ensuring that there is an international standard that is followed. There was also emphasis placed on creating technical and on-site capacity, and those are more of your, as before, your missions, the type of people that are needed to operate and maintain the telescope, and also bring students from an undergraduate to a postgraduate to study astronomy. And this was done specifically by having particular bursaries for students to study this. So we started off in 2005 with 9 grants for PhD and master's students. And at the time, we didn't get 9 students applying. We got less than 9 students applying. And that's just because there wasn't much interest in astronomy. Not many students or individuals were aware of what we are trying to achieve. And also we found that going from an undergraduate into a postgraduate degree, it's not very popular within South Africa. Most undergraduates, when finishing or completing their degree, they would go and find a job that would be more lucrative in a sense than staying within academia. So what we had to do is try to make our bursaries more competitive with industry. And we found that by doing that, we got more students. And to date, we have over 1,400 student bursaries. And these are bursaries at all different types of levels. So we started out with PhDs and master's bursaries. And we found that we had to provide interventions from undergraduate up until postdoctoral research fellowships in order to create this community of African researchers in astronomy. And that worked very well. One of the initiatives that I thought that I would mention as well is that we also very recently started what we call our graduate or internship placement program. And we try to use all the different expertise in engineering and science that we have within the current organization to look at how we can address some of the high unemployment issues that we face in South Africa, and giving these individuals an opportunity to work with us, but in a range of different areas. And we found that this program has become very popular. We've just had recently a call for applications going out, and we've received almost 2,000 applications for a very limited amount of positions that we have. And what makes this program work very well is that we've made our internships a very long period. So it's a 3-year program that you are placed with us. This gives the student more job security. And it also allows for the student to grow professionally with us. And we found that by doing this, it gives the student to study further. So we pay for their studies to study further. We also allow them or give them the chance to explore mentorship programs with us. So it's become a very popular way of retaining students. And if you look at just the gender distribution currently that we have for students that have been part of this program, the number of women that we are retaining within this program is very high compared to what we usually see of retention rates for women in STEM. And these kinds of initiatives just add to how we can retain women within the science environment. And this graph just shows it's still a very young program, but we are having a number of these graduates that have entered being employed on a permanent basis with us. So it's a good way to not just train students for the general economy and jobs created in the economy, but also if you're looking to recruit talent. And then I've just have some examples of the type of students that we have got through this program. This is Bulelani, and she's from a rural town in the Eastern Cape region of South Africa. She studied mechanical engineering, and she's also have some industry experience where she served as an accountant officer. And we took her into our software engineering team, and we gave her the exposure within our software engineering team. We also gave her professional exposure by allowing her to take different courses, and she's done very well in this sort of program. So we are trying to focus on those individuals who have come from, we could say, the demographics that haven't been given a chance within South Africa, and some of the most impoverished regions or communities through our internships. And we found that just using this particular model works very well for us. And then I want to talk about some of the partnerships and international partnerships that we currently have that are helping us in training the broader African partner countries. And these are specific projects such as the Development in Africa with Radio Astronomy or DARA project. It's one of our biggest projects currently to train. These are African individuals from those partner countries. This is a UK-South African bilateral project with both governments. Both were, well, the UK has put £4.3 million into funding this particular project with match resources from the South African government. It also has some EU support. And what the idea is with this particular project is to provide training in radio astronomy within the 8 different SKA partner countries. And it consists of 2 programs: a basic training program, which is giving students exposure to what astronomy is, what is radio astronomy. Also, they get technical and hands-on experience with the actual telescopes and the instrumentation. And this gets done by giving them training within South Africa, or we now have a telescope that can be used in Ghana. So they get this hands-on experience as well. They also get computer training, as we found that the lack of computational skills in Africa, especially in training within Linux and Python, that is lacking right now. So we need to give them the very basics in computer training. And these students form a talent pool, who can then be recruited into the advanced training program. And these are MSc and PhD places, and most of them are currently placed within the UK. Some are placed within South Africa or an African institution that can offer a degree in astronomy. And then we've expanded this radio astronomy model to a DARA big data program, and it's still through the UK-South African partnership. And this has become one of the flagship projects, and it's currently led by Manchester University. And this is also a very similar model to DARA, where various training initiatives in data science and big data are currently carried out through schools, workshops, and hackathons on the continent. And this is basically preparing or giving students the tools and skills to be able to work with big data sets. And these are students coming from a range of different backgrounds. So we're not just talking about astronomy students. We have students in biotechnology. We have students in mathematics, engineering backgrounds, and training them as in one set of, in one pool, and giving them those set of skills. These students then form a pool to be able to be recruited into MSc and PhD projects. And these projects are not just within, I would say, astronomy, data science areas. They are in a range of different health types of projects. They are also sustainable agriculture type of projects. So we're trying to look at how can astronomy be used as a vehicle to transfer this knowledge to other research domains. And just because within astronomy and building these large telescopes, which I saw before, the amount of data that astronomy generates and will be generating in the future is humongous. And so this type of data or the type of data skills that we will need is quite urgent compared to many other industries. Yeah, so this is just a photo taken from my last big data school in Cape Town, and it just gives a breakdown of some of the students that have been participating in the school in trying to educate students from different African partner countries. So I spoke about these different types of workshops. These are just photos taken from our Big Data Africa training school. And we've also adapted our schools to face or to be more what African or what suits African students best. Because we spend a very small amount of time with them, these schools are usually 7 to 10 days, we found that transferring the knowledge that we want to through the schools, we need to do it in a very short amount of time. So our focus or model when running these schools is we try not to have many lectures, but we try to have students work more in groups, working on real life data sets. And the focus is more on giving them the necessary skills rather than the theory component of whether it is a specific area in machine learning or a certain technique that we are looking at. We also focus on the soft skills competencies, and these would be working in a team, communication skills. So it's quite a good way of training the students, and the growth of the students that you see within the 7 to 10 days, it's quite remarkable. And I think that if anyone is interested, I can share a paper that we did produce on what the model is that we use for this sort of training. Yeah, so I'm nearly done. So I just want to say that for astronomy, we talk about the skills that are needed for the fourth industrial revolution. And through our Big Data Africa programs, what we're trying to do is to look at how the big data challenge of the next generation of scientific facilities, which is through the SKA and other big telescopes, how can we build human capacity in dealing with large data sets, but then transferring that knowledge and innovation to other research domains. And we know that other research areas will be needing the knowledge that we currently have within the astronomy and radio astronomy domain. And very briefly, I just want to mention that through the African European Radio Astronomy platform, with Declan and the other stakeholders, we are preparing a draft white paper. And these are just some of the elements that I've prepared as part of the human capital and training paper. And what it basically emphasizes what could be the skills needed to build a knowledge force for the fourth industrial revolution. And many of the points mentioned over here have been mentioned by other panelists. So it's building this multidisciplinary skill sets, skills for tackling problems that involve big data sets, big data technologies, artificial intelligence applied to different research programs and domains, building closer institutional links between academia, research institutions, and industry. I know Ian mentioned this, and this is very important when it comes to looking at the employability of young professionals, and also how do we prepare them, because I would say that one of the elements that we have been facing is that we find that when a student comes from university, they're not properly prepared in terms of soft skill competencies and as well as their professional skills for the working environment. So we have to spend a lot of time with students just preparing them for the workplace. And I think that a lot needs to be done in building those links. Also looking at how we can foster translate research and development programs through open innovation and entrepreneurship programs. The fourth point there, embedding an entrepreneurial culture in institutions of higher education. I found this very important because, and how do we actually do that remains, well, it's still not very clear, but can we define programs that allow for that? And what we've been finding, even with doctoral students, they aren't prepared for, in a business sense, for what industry needs. So how can we help overcome that gap, essentially? And then the rest of the points just speaks to open collaboration through open platforms. This is open online research platforms. Currently in South Africa, we have the National Research Foundation establishing an African open science platform. So in order to be able to assist with the training and skills needed for that, we need to collaborate with our African partners, increasing open access to online training and e-learning platforms. It's become very important in, with what we've been seeing with COVID. And we also, as the South African Radio Astronomy Observatory, have found that we need to launch our own e-learning platform just to serve and to help the universities who aren't currently coping within South Africa to teach some of the basic radio astronomy courses within South African universities and the African partner countries that we deal with, but also on a broader, having the broader picture, how do we do this more broadly? And in the context of also thinking about lifelong learning will become more predominant in the fourth industrial revolution culture, and how do we make that something that is embedded in what we do. And then innovative learning and training solution targeted at women and people with disabilities. I mean, this transition to a digital economy is all good and well, but I think that we have the chance of a lot of people to be left behind. And as I said at the beginning of my talk, that we saw what in Africa, what the internet usage is. And I think that if Africa does not change or allow for opportunities in building a knowledge economy right now, the continent as a whole will be left out in the future. And I'm just going to end off with some of the words from the South African President and Chair of the African Union, Cyril Ramaphosa. And these are some of the words that he said at his Youth Day address on the 16th of June. So currently we have a large amount of young people that is unemployed in South Africa due to COVID-19. And he's asked that young people to come up with innovative ideas to help restart and kickstart our economy, and for them to take ownership of the economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bonita. I realize we are moving over time, so I've asked Rainer to give a highlight of his presentation. Rainer?
Okay, can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm going to run very quickly through this. My name is Rainer Fischer. I used to be a professor at Aachen University, where I'm still distinguished professor at Maastricht University in a materials-based institute. And currently I'm a presidential fellow professor at Purdue University. But currently I'm trapped in Germany because I cannot travel back to the US because of the travel restrictions. So maybe that's one form of keeping back or holding back the skill sets and the trained people and counteracting some of the brain drain. So anyway, so I'm going to go very quickly. In the past hours, I worked for many years with Fraunhofer, and Fraunhofer is actually the organization as an applied research institute that pushed for Industry 4.0. Many people have never really understood what Industry 4.0 is all about. Today, everybody thinks it's the cyber-physical systems. But over the 4 development lines, from the steam generator to the automation towards this, in 2011, basically Germany, with Fraunhofer and some academic and industry partners, came up with this Industry 4.0 around the issues of standardizing manufacturing processes and to compare manufacturing between 4 different sites in Germany, for example, at Mercedes-Benz, because they could not repeat many of the things that were done in point A versus in point C and D. And this is actually the origin of Industry 4.0. And if you see on the next slide, there's a lot of buzzwords that were developed around Industry 4.0. Many people think they're similar, but today we see this all basically consolidated in this cyber-physical system. But I would like to remind you The key issues about Industry 4.0 is standardization. That is everything what it's about the, let's say, the operation, about the robots, about the human in terms of operations, but also in terms of processes. And ultimately, and that's what I would like to touch very briefly on, it's also about the products and value chains so that we can basically make that compatible on a global scale, not only on the German, the European, but in particular on a global scale. So just read this after my presentation. I'm happy to share that. So again, it is very, very confusing to many people, and it has been used very, very differently by many people. So this is an old Fraunhofer slide that we came up around 10 years ago and put this all together with all these buzzwords that you see here again. And for time reasons, I'm not going to read it out, but you see it always comes back to data, standardizing data, making data basically available. We heard very often in an open fashion, but also in terms of basically having human-machine interface. So literally in the 4.0, the 5.0 that was addressed before is already addressed. And I want to warn a little bit in setting up too many open platforms and standards because it gets confusing and we have not even really fulfilled this one. Now, industry was particular Industry 4.0 applied in the car manufacturing industry initially, then it went into IT, but then you saw all the subsets in the different industries that we in part heard about today, including agro 4.0, and on the next slide you see the pharma 4.0, which again is very fuzzy in terms of definition and nomenclature. So again, I just put here a slide up with all the different buzzwords, and I'm not going to go through this for time reasons because we are much over the presentation. Now, one of the key things that I would like to address, and in my past, I interfaced very heavily with industry. I think I can claim that in the life science space, I am maybe the professor that provided the most graduates with PhDs to pharmaceutical industry over the last 10 years, over 150 people that went to pharmaceutical industry. And we did this by literally better understanding the needs of the pharmaceutical industry, whether this is now small molecules or biologicals like antibodies and vaccines. And we did this along the value chain, basically from the idea to the product, from a technology readiness level 1 to a technology readiness level 9, to basically create advanced jobs, training on the job. And very often, and we have to really admit that, our academicians, our professors in all the European and also in the US and Asian countries, they are still teaching outdated technologies and basically applications that are not targeted for the market. And we were one of the first that really learned to interface with industry and make that happen. And that's key solution and reason for achieving that was really doing this in an interactive way with industry, but also other academic partners, building academic and industrial networks and complementing each other along the value chain to basically identifying a target, developing a medicine, whether it's an antibody, a vaccine, small molecules, manufacturing it with the cell lines, doing the upstream, that means the fermentation, the scale up to the 100,000 liter and more, the process develop, the downstream, the purification, and then all the assays for the quality assurance, quality control, and ultimately for regulatory approval. So in the end, the next slide just shows literally what I had on the value chain in bullet points. So I'm not going to go through this for the time reasons. But today, all these issues with the value chain thinking is undermined and supported with the data, with the personal data, big data, but also artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep neural networks, and deep neural learning. And that doesn't matter to which product candidates or categories you can apply that all the way to the regulatory approval. So I had intended to talk about three major product groups: antibodies, the key reason being antibodies being the key molecules in diagnostics and therapeutics. And if you look in the entire revenue stream in the pharmaceutical industry, not only biopharmaceuticals, we have now more than 70 approved antibodies, and they generate 42% of the total global revenues are manufactured and provided with this one single product group. Now, there's a lot of differences, whether you use this in oncology or neurological disorders or inflammation or infectious diseases. And the interesting thing is there's only one single antibody that has ever been developed and approved for treating infectious diseases, and that is syncytial virus or the respiratory syncytial virus disease. Nothing in HIV, nothing in COVID, you name it, in all infectious diseases, a lot of product candidates in the pipeline. And the key reason being the markets are not big enough in infectious diseases until we now realize with COVID-19 what kind of consequences that can have. I wanted to do a similar brief discussion about vaccines. Everybody's talking about vaccines right now. And again, we see a lot of issues where people are fooled in a big sense to basically promising us that in November we will have a vaccine for COVID-19. That's a total lie. That will never happen. So again, billions of dollars and euros being invested, which is good, but we have to be also honest. And I was very thankful for the presentation by Finbar that we really also analyze the situation, that we are honest to ourselves and not making wrong promises. The development and the registration of a vaccine takes a minimum of 7 years after you have an initial hit and lead that you have already developed. So again, you might be able to accelerate certain things with the Pharma 4.0 industry 4.0 standards and standardizations. But again, I think this is going to be almost impossible to provide by the end of this year. Also enzymes, if we are coming back, for example, to COVID-19, they have certain enzymes like proteases that basically mature the molecule. And again, they could be perfect targets to basically modulate and intervene in the pathogenesis. Again, for time reasons, I cannot talk too much about that. The manufacturing of these systems as well. So basically you need cell lines, whether they are bacteria, yeast, or mammalian cells in particular. And how do you standardize all these systems from the gene to the product to the process and the scale up in the hundreds of thousands of liter scale? And how do you capture the final product in a pure form? That's the downstream processing. How do you formulate it and ultimately bring it to regulatory approval? So again, industry and Pharma 4.0 standards can help there a lot and improve it, but we cannot really reduce the timelines more than a year or two in this long discovery, development, and marketing process. Ultimately, we need to basically also do all the analysis of the biopharmaceuticals that we developed and manufacture. Again, I'm going to skip this. We need to release it so that the products that we provide are safe to the patient, to the consumer, if it's in the food and feed sector, or even in animal health. So this all needs to be followed. So maybe just with the last slide I have here, I think it's very important to continue what you've built to develop the skills for the biopharmaceutical sector, whether it's expert training, qualification, we heard about that, also advanced jobs, because these are really high-skilled jobs. So this is going to be really challenging with people with very little background in education. What very often is overlooked is training on the job to refine skills for continued training and education. In particular in compliance with regulatory approval and guidelines, whether it's with the EMA, the European Medical Agency, or the US counterpart, the FDA, or in Asia. Also, we need to train the people better to standardize reagents, cell lines, assays, and products. So the QA, QC component. So this comes back to the original idea of manufacturing in the automotive industry to improve the standards for the car manufacturing. And this is in the end very similar in the pharmaceutical industry. The continuous education for me would be very important to be built along value chains. So what I showed before, from the idea to the product, the regulatory approval. And I think today, and also what Declan is very heavily involved, this needs to be done with respecting the SDGs, circular economy, as we heard before, and basically the green technologies. So they try to do this, but I think we are far from achieving that. Many people only use the buzzwords, but in reality, we are far from really achieving that. So in the end, we should also focus maybe a little bit. We cannot do everything, maybe on the key areas with the greatest opportunities. And one of them is definitely right now the COVID-19 and the next pandemic that's going to come. And in the end, based on what we learned from Industry 4.0 concepts to be applied in pharma, or as Ian said in the beginning, maybe in the food feed sector, even with all these different technologies, key enabling technologies, we might go faster to achieve that, but I think there's still a lot of hurdles. and regulatory will always put us in our limits, right? So, because in the end, we need to protect the consumer to provide really a safe food and feed, or ultimately a pharmaceutical product for their use, so that we are really sure that we can help them and that we don't provide them additional problems. I think that's what I would like to share with you very quickly. I'm sorry that I ran through that, but we were unfortunately much over time, and I tried to do this now in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Rainer, thank you very much. You did a superb job. And since we are over, I just wanted to sort of take a break from the schedule to just ask if anybody would like to pose a question to Karina, because I'm sure at this stage she's got many other ministers, looking for her time. She's been very generous with her time. So I just really wanted to say at this point, if anybody wanted to put a question to Karina.
So this is when I can drink my coffee. This is great, Declan. Thanks. I was going to just ask Karina a quick question in terms of, you made a really good point in terms of the requirement for the skills and the new skills for researchers and how they could transition into industry. But I think, what's your take on the relevance of those skills and how they would apply, say, to operators and technicians as well? I guess there's an opportunity to ensure that they've got the right skills as well, or have you come across that in a Bulgarian context?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question. I think that so many things we talked so far that my my head is exploding. It was super interesting also, the African perspective. Now, you see, I mean, my trouble is the following, that this COVID now is posing a huge pressure on us. Basically, Germany and France are again with some other member states lack of experienced people, because many third countries people left Europe. So we are now under a huge pressure because there is again squeezing up some brains to those countries, and I always wonder why we are not talking honestly on high level, because basically if they're training our people, this means that they're very well prepared, no? But where is the problem? Basically, the problem is that most of these very well prepared researchers are going to pharmaceutical sector, when I'm talking for biological or chemical studies, where there is a huge interest. I mean, the faculties are exploding from students, basically. Also the medical sector. There are a lot of foreign students in the medical studies. But basically, less than probably 10% choose to pursue a research career. They immediately go to business, which is fine. I absolutely agree. But I don't think we foster some concrete programs or a research career in industry. So basically, after 10 years time working hard in industry, basically more or less you are depending, of course, on the company, but in the most cases, when you are above 45, you're losing this initial motivation to enlarge or to experiment, and basically you are anyhow going into a pattern. So I think that we don't have a lack of trained people, or we don't have a lack of critical mass. Now we have a lack of keeping at least 10% of generation that is working really in blue sky research, but really excellent research, young people that basically fit new ideas, and we provide them floor to feel comfortable and to work and to create businesses, to basically find new solutions and new ideas, because the competition to the companies is huge, and the supply value chain is also changing. How all of you are going to pay all these high salaries only to Europeans? This is also quite a challenging question, because again, during this seminar, Declan was a little bit, I think, again, this balancing for basically investing in people that we have to employ, because there is a lot of people that are unemployed, or there is a lot of young generation that don't have the skills. And again, we are talking for one layer that we really desperately need. And this is people not only with high-tech skills, but people with that can master artificial intelligence tomorrow, no? That are more clever than computers. So from my perspective, I'm initially, as usual, very positive. I think that this awful crisis now, we should use it and basically start something new and more ambitious. And I hope that together with you and with all of you and people like you, we will call the politicians to invest also in researchers and high-tech sectors. We can't only invest in reskilling, because we need one advantage to cope with the rest of the competition in the world. This is, for my opinion, the biggest problem. And the second, of course, as you saw from my messages in the we were writing during the seminar, there is a huge problem not recognizing the mobility of young people nowadays, and the lack of not of security, but anyhow a kind of trust in the institutions, that if they take on such an interesting but highly risk job, they will be, of course, having also their chance for personal, family pattern. Because at the end of the day, we are talking for artificial intelligence, but thanks God, we are far away from being or becoming robots. Okay, so. So there is a lot of work, Declan and colleagues, a lot of work, but I think we can draw some very good conclusions from today's seminar, and of course target the German presidency now, because they start a discussion on the new European research area. And I again see the ambitions on hydrogen, on the Green Deal and everything, but I think on the revived European research area, basically we should tackle the human resources.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Karina.
Fantastic, Karina. Thank you so much.
Rainer has a question, I think.
Yeah, so I would like to ask you, Karina, what are your feelings about sponsoring more the blue sky research? And the reason being, I've brought 6 products to the market over the last 15 years together with industry. So I could never have done that without industry when I was at Fraunhofer. And all 6 products that we brought to market would I consider as a blue sky idea initially. And literally for the first 5 to 7 years, all these 6 products that made it to the market, they never received any funding. And as a matter of fact, Declan and I, we went to the European Parliament on that matter in 2013, I believe it was. And we made several cases, around 10 different stories that we had in Fraunhofer. And it is really amazing. I always have this really weird connection of not being funded for the first 5 to 7 years for products and for solutions that became commercially viable. And I think we need to counteract that. We don't have to fund any crazy idea, but I think we should have a fund to do this. And the second comment you made earlier on is with a brain drain, and I see a very big brain drain with not the young people, but actually the experienced people. How can you either get them back, or before they go into retirement, set up maybe like a mentor program where experienced people can help the young people? You can train them as much as you want, but if somebody doesn't have the entrepreneurial skills, he will never make it. He will need a team. And I think you should really think about in the EU to have a program where you basically have experienced people supporting young people. I'm currently doing this with 2 very young people in artificial intelligence in Paris that will have actually their investor pitch today. They already got 150,000 euros 2 weeks ago from a company that I basically connected them with. But again, programs like that are desperately needed. And my question would be, can you help both in the blue sky research arena as well as in the last one that I said with the mentor program?
Rainer, what you're saying is really for me, how you say, honey for my soul. I mean, I told you I'm completely recently shocked. Recently, I'm talking for the last 5 years. What happened on European level? And of course, sometimes you're saying, who cares what Brussels is saying? The truth is that I disagree with this, because what Brussels is saying, maybe we are a little bit, okay, we don't care. But anyhow, it's affecting the national and regional politicians. Anyhow, you know, with 1 year, you hear what's happening there. And what I'm worried is what you're saying. The last 5 years, we again enter into this, in my opinion, very old-fashioned and not productive dialogue that we should fund applied sciences only, targeted science, because fundamental science is not delivering impact on the society and the economy. I am one of the people that completely disagree with this. And I'm calling for investing in quality of research. Doesn't matter what research. We were arguing the other day here on with some colleagues, politicians in the Council of Ministers. This is what I told them. And also I have quite a lot of now discussions with the colleagues from the DG Regio. This is about the structural funds and the cohesion policy, because they're pushing us to invest in applied research, because they are worried that investments in research are very far away from the economic needs in Bulgaria. But this is also normal, because what I'm explaining is that sometimes the economy is, for example, developing slower, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't invest in fundamental research that can, as you said, give birth to later to a greatest ideas. We should invest in fundamental research also because it has a huge, I start with the social and economical impact, because if we stop this, first there will be no great ideas like yours after 10 years. And secondly, I wonder who will be motivated to train and to mentor the next generation of researchers. If all of researchers start to do applied research and become entrepreneurs, I have a huge worry, and I think this is all the world will laugh at us, at Europe, because soon we will drain from motivated people like you to train the new generation of people, researchers. And concerning what you are saying about this program, I'm supporting with 2 hands this idea. I'm a strong believer of mentoring. That's why I said we should find a way to enlarge, to scale up instruments linked to mentoring and trainership programs, not only strongly enshrined into the institutional, for example, PhD networks or master's program, but much more advanced. And this is lacking also for funding on European level. It's lacking, for example, concerning the European Institute of Technology. I'm very keen on supporting the idea, but unfortunately I'm criticizing a lot what is happening, because basically their master's and PhD programs are only among the top best university ranked in the first 50. This is also ridiculous. There is a lot of new hubs of excellence or small pot of excellence in faculties, in local industries. So this should be scaled up, because closing only on the high level of the pyramid, first it's very narrow. Secondly, it's again about what we're discussing all the time, about the critical mass, about the quantity. So my call to my colleagues is asking me is exactly this, to not to exclude blue sky research, on the contrary, just to set up a new criteria for excellent research, not new criteria for excellent research, to invest in excellent research, but to top up with new criteria so that to foster engagement of young people in research, and secondly, to stimulate more training programs. This is my call. So I fully agree with you, basically. I think that we need more people like you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks indeed, Rainer. Thank you. You've been more than generous, Karina. More than generous.
It was very interesting. Let's keep in touch and try to draft something from this seminar and to send it also to the commissioner and to other relevant politicians to hear.
Well, happily, Karina. No, indeed, we will do that. We'll stay in contact. And again, my thanks to you for your availability and really sharp input and insights. And I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of the speakers and the audience. So,
yep. Thanks, Karina.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Happy to meet you. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. So, everybody, from the sublime to the people, to the citizens, very much looking forward to our next contributor, Orla. Orla, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me okay, Declan?
I can indeed. And Orla is the Director of Academic Affairs at Pharma. And, what I've labeled, success stories will be, I'm sure, fascinating. So very much looking forward to meeting your proteges, Orla.
That's great, Declan. I'm going to try to upskill myself because I've been asked to cut down my time, and yes, I know it's been quickly, so I'll try to do this, and yet you can stay on top of what I'm saying. So very briefly, as Declan said, I'm Director of Academic Affairs. I've been working within Pharma for the past 11 years and working with many hundreds and hundreds of success stories now in our upskilling initiatives. So I wanted to just briefly bring you through what we call the Pharma life cycle. So I suppose the first step in anything we do is with our links with industry. Apologies, I just, okay. So our first link is with industry, identifying the needs, the future skills, current needs, and so on, okay? So we have appointed particular people who, and their role is to liaise with industry. They talk about the technical skills, the transversal skills, cognitive skills, that we've already spoken about time and time again today, and looking at current and future skills needs. And part of that then is they collaborate with us on program development. So through that then, as I said, it's both with the pharma, the biopharma, the medical device, food sectors are the sectors we're involved with. We also liaise with education and with government in our upskilling initiatives, okay? And then of course the next step is the program design. Okay, so within program design, as we've already referred to, we look at obviously the key academic technical skills that we want to develop. We're looking at the cognitive skills, the transferable skills, and transversal skills, all going towards what we call our T-shaped graduates, which is a very key part of it. Okay, we regularly hear back from our students, not alone the technical skills that they achieved, but the presentation skills and many of the skills that Finbar has related earlier on, how useful that had been in their careers. Okay, the next step then is recruitment of our students onto our programs, and this is an essential part because, as we know, and what the Commission is looking at is how we target people. Okay, so we're looking at not just people who have previous education, but we're looking at people who have, maybe they're job seekers, they maybe have been unemployed for a particular amount of time, they might have dropped out of education fairly early on, okay? They may be returners, so returners being people who've decided to stay at home to look after the children for a period of time, so they've been out of the workplace for maybe 10 or 15 years. And then also we've employed persons. So we may have persons who are working in lower skill jobs, who want to transfer into kind of higher end manufacturing sectors, or people who are already working in manufacturing, who may still have limited education, or already have or are degree qualified, who want to hone in on additional skills to develop their careers. So when we meet applicants, I think this is a key part of what we do. We look at each individual, we interview them by team, we look at their current core competencies, what their transferable skills are, if they're maybe a right fit for a program like ours or right fit or culture for the company they want to get into, and we give them advice on the best strategy for their career development. So we ensure that the reason they're taking on a particular program is going to enhance their career development. And one of the key messages we're often trying to get across is you do not need a white coat to work in, for example, the pharmaceutical sector. There's so many support roles there as well. So yes, there are a lot of roles in process development and drug development, but there's also engineering roles, health and safety, HR, finance, logistics, and so on. And many people coming onto our programs will have previous experience or may have previous experience in a different environment across this. So if we go back to 2008 and 2009, when we were going into a deep recession, we had a high number of people coming in from the construction industry who had very significant experience and yet didn't understand how they could transfer easily into the pharmaceutical, medical device or food sectors, because they were able to follow regulations, for example, okay, which is a key competency that you would need to work in the sector. Okay, and just remembering that over 1/3 of roles in high tech are operator and technician level. Okay, so you don't always need to be degree qualified, but having a qualification and an understanding of some of the technical skills, the regulatory skills, and then of course the transversal skills, being able to work in a team effectively, for example, being one of the key ones, communication being another one. Okay, so it's quite easy to upskill applicants for such roles. And finally, and this is, I suppose, a key component of what we do and what's differently, and we call this the InnoPharma way. So delivering the cognitive skills, helping students with CV and interview preparation, doing individual coaching and individual presentations. So
I was a single mom looking for work as an administrator. Nobody was calling me, but reading about the pharma industry in Ireland that actually opened up my eyes. I was like, wow, this is what's happening, and I'm being left out of it. So that's how I came about doing the level 6 certificate in pharmaceuticals, doing the manufacturing process technology course and the pharmaceutical science course. Gives you an insight on how the pharmaceutical industry works in manufacturing medicines. I was able to go to the lab and have an idea on all the tablet testings. You know, when you get into the job, you actually do those in-process checks. They have online lectures, which made it easy for me because being a single mom, I can't leave my son back at home in the evenings. The tutors in the course were very welcoming. They were able to give guidance on what you can actually do with the course once you finished with it. Immediately, as I put in that InnoPharma level 6 certificate on my CV, I was getting calls for work, and I was actually able to choose where I wanted to work. I'm working as a packaging operator for a pharmaceutical company and have progressed to a level 7 degree, which is now in business operations within the pharmaceutical industry. My name is Goodness. I'm hoping to work in regulatory affairs. That's my dream.
Okay, so another example. So again, going back to people who've been unemployed, been homemakers, and being able to help them with, firstly, their CV, their interview skills, being able to tailor their CV to particular job, to job descriptions and so on is really important. So the course structure is first looking at who delivers the programs. So our lectures, as I said, they are a cross of academic and industry-led lectures. We have guest lectures coming in from this industry. And of course, this is a key part of helping our students to network. And as we know, networking is a major part of helping people to get a job. So they're able to communicate what's happening on a day-to-day basis, what the developments are happening within the sector, which is more than just what students would normally get at an academic level. Then our program leaders. So we have assigned program leaders to each of our programs. So each class would have one program manager, and this really helps with learner interaction and learner support. As we talked about the personal growth, the well-being of the student, it's key, especially for people who've been out of education for quite a while. Okay, so our program leaders are there for kind of a daily support for our students. They're there at the admissions process, so they understand the background for the student, they understand where they're trying to take their career, they're there to help them with any personal or maybe technical issues that are preventing them from their engagement and helping with motivation. And then we appoint one-on-one mentors and coaches. And our mentors and coaches are professional individuals to work with our students on a one-on-one, and then they can help them with overcoming personal challenges and in giving them advice in their next steps in their careers as well. And finally, and going back full circle, our industrial liaison personnel who help our students with getting jobs and placements within industry. And that's a key part of their process as well. So as I said, as well as academic modules, we develop our students' CV skills, their presentation skills, and their networking skills. We help them to identify work placement opportunities to get some experience, develop their interview skills, one-on-one mentorship, okay, and so on. And we help students post-program as well. So right up to maybe 6 months or 12 months after the program, we're happy to say that mostly, even back when these initiatives were only aimed at job seekers, we would have 70–75% of our students in roles at the end of the program, or fairly shortly after the end of the program. So just again, a selection of some of the feedback we get. You know, we have Mark here who dropped out of education without completing his degree 19 years ago. So he had a certificate in engineering. He was working in a low-paid social care sector, needed a change, and then realized he could get onto one of our level 7, which is a BSc in 1 year, and has transferred into a quality assurance assistant role. Again, Mark would have had previous experience due to his work in the social care sector. So documentation, you know, quality, all were transferable skills. And once he got to understand that, he became more confident and was able to transfer easily. Marianne came from Slovakia. She had an MSc in project management. She struggled to get a job, worked in hospitality, and again, she completed her level 6 and very quickly got a job. And again, most of our students will give testament to the fact that a huge part of it was working with them on an individual basis and helping them with their CVs. So I'll just finish off with Laura.
InnoPharma has given me great confidence to know that you can go from one career to a completely different career. In school, I felt I wasn't very academic. Studying was difficult for me. I went on to manage a couple of equestrian centres, did that for about 7 years. I moved towards InnoPharma then. My uncle was actually studying with InnoPharma at the time, and he encouraged me to get in touch and enrol in a level 6 pharmaceutical manufacturing and medical device course. It was very daunting because I had no experience in pharmaceuticals. It was just everybody was so supportive, as well as the tutors. Because a lot of people didn't have experience in the pharmaceutical industry. They were going in and starting from the very bottom. There was 8 modules. The Learning to Learn helped us to learn how to study properly. I retained the information rather than just being able to regurgitate everything that was on the page. We did pharmaceutical science, which I found really interesting. The preparation for work was really good as well. So that helped pick competencies and skills from my previous career. The lecturers, they all come from industry, so they have the knowledge and skills and they know what the pharmaceutical companies are looking for. Before I sat my exams, I had 3 job offers, which was fantastic, you know, so it just goes to show that it really works. I finished my exams on the Friday and I started my new job on the Monday. My name is Laura McCarthy, I'm from Tala and I work in a medical device company in Blanchardstown.
Thank you very much for your time, and I take any questions. I hope I cut down my time by half and you were able to keep
that was great, Order.
That was fantastic. Very good. Well, I think we are nearing conclusion. Any urgent questions from anybody? And to
how could we do it in 2 hours next time, Declan?
Not sure. Yeah. But it was all good. It was all good.
That was really good.
Fantastic speakers. No, none of it. Yeah, it all kept my attention anyway, and they've been a terrific audience. So, no problem. I think it was time well spent, in my view. And
there were some great questions as we went along. Some really good questions from participants. So we've tried to get answers and have opinions as we went along, which really worked, I think.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And as you know, Ian, we're going to translate this into a report and certainly take up Karina on her invitation. So that's exactly why we are having this discussion, is really to inform policymakers, because that's where, that's where it begins. What is the policy basis going to be for skills in Europe in future, and indeed elsewhere? So, so as far as I'm concerned, it's been a very, very, very informative exercise. So I would expect that we will circulate the report within 2 weeks to the speakers, and then circulate it more widely to the participants, and then come up with a draft that we'll bring to policymakers, and of course keep everybody informed along that road. Do we have some final words from yourself, Ian?
That was really good. I think it's great to hear from everyone talking about how the agreement that the Industrial Revolution and industry in Europe, how it's going to change significantly over the next 20 years. Similarly, in South Africa, that was really interesting, Bonita, to hear about the levels of access to internet, and that they're fundamentals, which is really, really important to hear that. I think we've talked about the policies and how they're backing up what we're saying, both from an industry and a skills perspective, and a research agenda. Martina gave a great overview in terms of the research side. And I think it's been really, really good. I think the report will be very interesting to see how it comes together. And I think we have a clear audience that wants to hear suggestions and ideas for how we can help post-COVID recovery as well. So yeah. I would like to thank everyone. I think it's really important that we do these things, and that we try and show leadership in terms of how we can bring a recovery about within Europe and the African continent as well. I think it's really important to share those ideas as well.
No, certainly. And just really a note that we were looking forward to Sigmund being with us from the National Contact Point System in Poland. However, his family member was taken to hospital quite urgently, so he sends his regrets, but looks forward to it. So good. So I think we're there. Yes. Yeah. So again, my many thanks to our speakers, to the audience for sticking it out. Indeed, and we had some certainly, as you say, and some excellent questions. So we don't see this as the end. We see this as really the commencement of what is a hugely important political, policy, technical, scientific, and funding debate and discussion. So yeah. we hope we can add to that.
And thanks to Kieran as well for organising it all in the background. Thanks, Kieran.
Keeping us all online. Yeah. So thanks again. Thank you, Rainer. Thank you, Finbar. Martina, thank you so much. So let's be in touch. So
and Bonita in Cape Town, thank you very much.
Yes.
I look forward to catching up with you all soon.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it was interesting. Thank you so much for inviting me.
You're
very welcome.
Very welcome, Bonita. No, it's fascinating stuff. Yeah, and I don't think the issues you're dealing with are necessarily confined to Africa. I think they're indeed global issues. Indeed. So yeah, although we're far apart, the issues are common, and it's good to see. But then how do you evolve that global challenge response? So anyway,
okay.
Do that again. Thanks.
Have
again.
a great day, folks. Thank you for your contributions, and thanks to participants.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.